So what I'm proposing to do today is really just tell you my own personal story. And it's not really a story that's as glamorous and successful as you might imagine. I think a lot of entrepreneurs will also tell you that the path along the way isn't always paved perfectly. So I'll tell you that story, and hopefully you guys can take some inspiration from bits of it, or learn some. Perhaps you can learn some of the lessons that it took me years to learn by having to do it. Is it coming through all right, Claire? Because you can hear me all right?
Yeah. There you go. I've just taken off the presentation.
Okay. So my story really is one of sort of entrepreneurialism really here, rather than tech. I understand you guys are all considering careers in tech. So hopefully, what I will cover today will give you a bit of insight to what it might be to be an entrepreneur at some point in your career. At the end, sort of as we progress, I'll tell you that story about me and how I sort of got where I am. And then later on in the session, what I'm going to do is also talk a little bit just about FinTech, which is the kind of particular industry that I've sort of made my personal success in the latter stages of my career. So without further ado, I'll jump on. My story starts as a little boy in London. I went to school in London, and I was doing pretty well at school when I was a 13-year-old. And I was doing so well when I was 13 that they rather foolishly jumped me forwards a year whilst I was at school. So I found myself getting to doing my A-levels age 17. But unfortunately, having got sadly distracted in my sixth form by what was then new subject of computing, I actually didn't do terribly well in my A-levels. I ended up only with a C, D and E in my A-levels. So I ended up coming to Cardiff, age 17 and a half, to study computer systems on clearing, which was a bit of a revelation. I was really pretty wet behind the ears when I arrived here. And it wasn't even that rosy when I arrived. I scraped through my first year doing maths and electrical engineering, but I was already kind of getting pretty good and pretty excited at computing, and ended up sort of surprising everybody in my finals with coming top in the year and getting a 2-1, largely based on being pretty good at computing. But sort of at that stage, as everyone does when they're at uni in their last year, they start considering their future careers, as I guess a lot of you are. And back then, in the early 80s, the careers for people who had skills in computing and electronics were sadly mostly in the kind of defence industry. So I did a whole bunch of sort of interviews around the UK with people like Plessy and Marconi, who wanted me to come along and design rockets to kill people in Russia and satellite systems that would allow Britain. And I just wasn't inspired by it at all, really. So I will admit I took the cheap option, which was I didn't like any of those ideas at all, really, any of those jobs. And I decided instead to stay on at uni and do a PhD. So I found myself at Cardiff studying hard to try and do something innovative and interesting in the world of computer networking. And that's what I sort of did my PhD on. Just to put some context to amuse all of you guys now, back in 1983, when I was doing my finals, the first PC, the IBM PC, was just 2 years old. Microsoft was just an idea and a small number of people, and didn't even get to IPOing for another 3 years after that. And computer networks were a completely new thing. Ethernet hadn't even become a standard in 1983, and really didn't become mainstream with the invention of network switches, which allow you to plug computers and devices into little switches like you see today, which didn't really come along until 1989. So it was pretty early in the days of networking. So if you were to fish my PhD off a shelf somewhere from Cardiff Uni and you read it, you would be probably highly unimpressed with it. But it was pretty interesting at the time. Perhaps the kind of early signs in my case of being an entrepreneur was that I got quite involved whilst I was doing my PhD, being a DJ and sound engineer at Cardiff Students' Union. And perhaps that entrepreneurial flair came out then, in as much as that me and a friend of mine managed to persuade the Students' Union that they should invest £250,000 to build the UK's first really student union nightclub, which back in those days was called the Hanging Gardens in Cardiff Students' Union. And I used to spend my evenings and days doing all those kind of crazy things. Anyway, I got my PhD in '89, and I then decided that I would start my career as an entrepreneur, because I developed some reasonably interesting technology as part of my PhD. And I'd met a guy in Cardiff who had a small business and we decided to go into business together. And so coming out of doing my PhD, I set up my first business, which was called Light Data Communications. And we developed some quite innovative networking devices and sold them across the UK and even in parts of Europe, tens of thousands of them. And we were momentarily with that company really quite successful. But back in those days, the pace of innovation that was going on in the world of computing networking was terrifyingly fast. I mean, you could come up with an innovation that was world leading, and within a year, it was redundant and dead. So it's pretty hard to start a business and build all the sort of things you have to do to sort of build success as a business, which take years and years and years in a world where your innovations that you spent all your time developing are already redundant within such a short space of time. So, you know, I think in hindsight, and perhaps the sort of lesson I'd like to share with you guys, if you're ever considering being entrepreneurial, was I think personally, in my case, I sort of started being an entrepreneur too soon. I had way insufficient experience of the industry that I was going into, having really only been an academic. As somebody, sorry, I wasn't sure then whether someone was trying to speak. So one of the lessons about entrepreneurs is when I look now out at the world of people and entrepreneurs who are really successful, one of the most common things I see as a sort of pattern for success is the most successful entrepreneurs seem to me to be people who've gone out into industry and cut their teeth and worked for a number of years in industry where they've built themselves a network, exposed themselves to bright, smart people, and spend lots of time talking about the problems that are in the industry that they work in, and then they decide to branch out and take an entrepreneurial leap. I didn't do it that way. I sort of started, and I think the result of that for me was that it took many years before I really kind of made it. Quite a lot of failures and failed attempts at different things as well. So definitely the best model is to sort of go out into industry and learn the tools of your trade. However, it's kind of a paradox as well, because I think what I also observe is that many people who go out and take on a job become sort of caught in this inevitable trap by the salary they earn in that job, the relationships that they form, and the responsibilities they take on in life, which actually then makes it really quite hard for them to actually branch out. I speak to an awful lot of people even today who've got interesting ideas and the ambition to leave their day job and go out and start a business, but a lot of them actually sadly end up not being able to do that because they are just trapped in this paradox that they can't give up the money they earn, they don't want to take the risk, and it's just too much of a leap of faith. And so you do have to naturally be a bit of a risk taker if that's something that you want to do. In my case, it was easy. I was a PhD student with no income, no dependents, and few costs. So actually at that very moment in my time, although perhaps I didn't have the experience, it was quite an easy thing to do, to just say, well, I've got nothing to lose, so let's give this a go. Anyway, back to the story. Light Data, that first business of mine, came to the end of the road in about 95. It had done quite well, but it was struggling along. And perhaps more importantly, the business partner I started that company with had proven to be more of perhaps a hindrance than a help. He wasn't really an entrepreneur, and I think I should have acted personally much earlier to sort of recognise that I was unlikely to go on and really achieve my ambitions in partnership with him. But so in 95, I reached a sort of difficult decision that I needed to kind of branch out and branch away from him and that business, and had to go through a very difficult negotiation to exit. I developed some technology in the company that we've been running together, and I wanted to sort of develop that into a new company. He didn't want to let me go with that technology, so in the end I had to give him back all of my shares in the company. So he got the company, and I took and was allowed to go away with the ideas and set up a new company, which I did. And that company later went on to be called Avantis Limited. And we developed some very innovative solutions in the computing solutions for the academic market. And that business, Avantis, is still there today. Has been quite a successful small business in the academic technology market. I was kind of its lead and CEO right the way through till about 2006, when I sort of stood down and went sort of part-time, and later exited in about 2012. It was quite a difficult time for me back then. It was, in the early noughties, I just had children, was married, And I found myself at a sort of junction where the kind of Advantist journey of academic technology had come to the end. And I was sort of sat at home, having sort of stepped out of my day job, fishing for new ideas and new things to do with my life and for my career. And I actually took it upon myself at that point, having originally studied and been a coder at university, programmer. I took it upon myself to relearn to code again. So I was at home looking after young children, sitting on a computer trying to relearn how to be a coder again and reacquire those skills, because one of the things you learn when you start to take on leadership role in a company is you can't do the day job of the things perhaps you love, like coding, like I did back then. But so that and at that moment in my career, I was kind of at a real junction. What do I do here? And actually, I decided momentarily that I would consider going back and getting a job. I was I'd been fishing around for a year or two without really finding what I wanted to do. And I saw this job pop up on an advert, I think probably back in those days rather than online, for a head of technology for Confused.com in Cardiff. And I was interested in it. It was like, wow, financial services, that's something left field for me. Is this an area I could get interested in? But I applied for the job, probably more because I had nothing else to do than give it a go. I applied for this job as head of technology at Confused.com. I went and had various rounds of interviews with the owners of some of the sort of senior people, and including David Stevens, who later was the CEO, Admiral being the owner back in those days of Confused.com. And I actually got down to the last three for the position of head of technology at Confused.com. And then I got a message one day saying, sorry, Richard, we're not offering you the job. And I was like, what? Why am I not getting this job? And then when I had the debrief, I was told that they'd come to the conclusion that I was too entrepreneurial to be offered the job as head of technology, which was viewed as a line management role. Someone explained to me that the owners of Confused.com, Admiral, were at that point in time, at that very time, smarting quite badly because a certain lady called Hayley Parsons had left Confused.com and Admiral to go and start GoCompare, and was being a right pain because she was probably doing a better job of running a comparison website than Confused.com was, and they were very sensitive to it. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I didn't get the job, and suddenly I was back thinking, what am I going to do with myself? But of course, the process of going and thinking about that role and what I would contribute to it got me thinking a lot about financial services and whether my background in software was something I could apply in the world of financial services to bring innovation and disrupt. And I suppose I should be very grateful that sort of moment happened, because that's exactly what I did. I went away and started thinking about Confused.com and GoCompare and price comparison and financial services. And it sort of coincided with a moment where I was having a personal problem with buying private medical insurance. I was trying to buy private medical insurance for my young family, and I was struggling to understand the products that were in the market, what they would offer, what I was getting for my money. And so I looked at the comparison sites as they were in 2007, 2008, and they didn't really offer price comparison solutions for health insurance or private medical insurance. And so I sort of set about thinking how I could solve that problem, which will lead me into a nice little segue into another sort of thing I just wanted to talk about, really, about being an entrepreneur, which is, if you're ever considering that idea and you think you want to set up a business, really the first question that you have to ask is, what's the wicked problem I'm going to solve with my new business if I branch out and start this business? And I think all entrepreneurial ideas, all new businesses start with that one simple thing: is what's a real problem that's troubling lots of people in the world that I can solve with my new business idea. And you should really work out a simple way to enunciate the problem you want to solve if you're really thinking about going into business and being an entrepreneur. And sort of the other sort of thing to say about that is, when you think you've worked out that problem and you start talking about that problem that you've identified to people, don't rely just on your friends and family in terms of the feedback you get about that problem, because they're all going to say, it's a great idea, you've identified a big problem. I would say at that point in time, even if this is not your skill set, try and find help to actually go and do a little bit of actual research, so some focus groups, a little bit of an online survey, whatever it takes to validate whether the problem you think you've seen is really a problem that lots of other people share an understanding and an appreciation of. So that's a really, really important thing. In my case at that moment, I guess the problem that I was thinking about solving was NHS queues are huge. It can take you a long time to go and get treated for certain types of things. Quality of care in the NHS is inconsistent. It's brilliant most of the time, but quite often you can wait a very long time and end up with a bad result. People want to consider private medical insurance, but there wasn't an effective way to find the best product and understand what they get for their money. And so my business that I decided to set up at that point, called ActiveQuote, was going to provide a solution to that by developing a proper, fully engineered price comparison solution that would allow people to compare all of the private medical insurance products on the market and drill down to see which product offered what and what they were really getting for their money, so that they could find the right combination of benefits from that insurance product against what they were prepared to pay. And so back in 2008, I employed a graduate software engineer, having relearned a bit of coding myself in the years before that, and we locked ourselves in a very small room down in Cardiff Bay, and we spent a year coding up that price comparison engine for health insurance, which then went on to become the kind of seed and the foundation of the business ActiveQuote.com today, which I'm still involved in today. So ActiveQuote as a business went on to, one of the problems we realized when we launched that price comparison site for health insurance was that we discovered that contrary to our expectations, and this is perhaps where a little bit of better research on my behalf at the beginning might have identified this, was that actually people, despite providing them with all that additional information about health insurance products, sadly, they were unable to sort of get sufficient information when seeing it online to get over the line themselves of pushing a button to buy a product. So we ended up having to build ActiveQuote to be a fully fledged and quite traditional in many ways insurance broker with a lot of advisors fully trained and capable of advising people over the telephone, so that where people started their journey doing a comparison on one of ActiveQuote's comparison engines, we could then follow that up with somebody to give them proper advice down the telephone to help them get over the line and make that decision and buy that insurance product. And that sort of worked. By 2010, we were sort of live and doing, rapidly growing amounts of business, and ActiveQuote has grown and grown and grown since then. Today, ActiveQuote, that business that I founded in 2009, employs something like 200 people in Cardiff, and provides price comparison solutions for not just health insurance, but also income protection insurance, life insurance. And actually, although you may not necessarily know the brand ActiveQuote, ActiveQuote actually powers many of the big name comparison sites for those products. So, for example, if you go on moneysupermarket.com today and you click on income protection insurance comparisons or health insurance comparisons, it will actually be ActiveQuote that's powering that technology and that comparison online, and ActiveQuote's people who will support you and advise you after that if that's what you need. So the sort of the final part of my sort of entrepreneurial story was that ActiveQuote was doing great, and in 2015 we sat down as a sort of management team in that company and said, right, look, this business is going great guns. What are we going to do next? How can we be even more ambitious? And we each went away and considered some wicked problems that we could potentially solve with our experience in technology. And we had a succession of different meetings in the company around whose idea we should take forwards. And one of the ideas that was put forwards, which I'm proud to say was my idea, was on observation that there was definitely a problem in that lots of people wanted to go and get full financial advice about how they should manage their finances and their money, but were finding that either financial advice was too expensive, and they didn't really want to pay fees to go and get that financial advice, or even that financial advisors were talking to them and having to turn them away, because the way that the financial advice model works is you have to be of a certain affluence that they have the prospect to make enough money with the percentages they charge that it's worth their time and effort to offer you financial advice. So the problem that we identified in 2015 was that lots of people want financial advice but can't necessarily get access to it, and they simply want to just be able to find an easy way to invest their money, even though they don't have the time or experience to do that properly themselves. And from that particular problem statement, the business Wealthify was born. At the time, it was a side project inside ActiveQuote, but we put a team of people on developing a prototype solution for Wealthify, and within a year, we realised that we were really onto something there, and so we decided that it was sufficiently interesting that we would spin it out as a new business and demerge it out of ActiveQuote, and that's what we did, and the rest is history, if you like. In 2017, I found myself then between 2015 and 2017, a very difficult time for me. I was CEO of ActiveQuote and driving that business forwards in parallel to being CEO of Wealthify, which was in a different building with a different team of people and a completely different business. Both of those businesses fully regulated by the UK Financial Conduct Authority, which puts a tremendous burden of responsibility on you as an individual. And so I sort of worked really hard for a few years then to try and find somebody to take over running ActiveQuote for me, and I appointed a person to do that in 2017 and went full time into Wealthify. And Wealthify's ascent was quite an interesting story, really. Very quickly, we realised we were onto something. We'd raised a lot of money, and in 2017, we found ourselves in the exciting position of having Aviva, one of the UK's largest financial services institutions, interested in effectively acquiring us. We did a deal which put a lot of money into the business and gave us an exit path, and I stayed with the business for 2 more years until 2020, and then finished when Aviva took sort of full ownership of it. I'm really excited to see that company today. Aviva are investing huge amounts of money in it. Since I left only 18 months ago, it's gone from 35 people to 80 or 90 people. And it sounds like it's going to become an important brand in the UK financial services landscape. So I'm looking at my clock to make sure I'm not waffling on and boring you all senseless here. Where are we at? We're at nearly half past 10. So I probably shouldn't waffle on too long. I just want to sort of just do the final bit of my talk really about FinTech, because these last 2 businesses that I told you about that I founded, ActiveQuote and Wealthify, come into this category, a phrase that was really only coined about 8 years ago, the phrase FinTech. And I'm just going to see if I can show you my deck here. This will probably help. How's that? So hopefully you guys can just see my little presentation here. FinTech. What is FinTech? I want to talk to you about this because you guys are all considering potential careers in technology. And FinTech is interesting because it's absolutely technology, but it's an industry that analysts and venture capitalists and private equity firms are hyper interested in and investing huge amounts of money in because of the potential it offers. So what is FinTech? FinTech is, in quite simple terms, exactly what it says on the tin. It's the use of technology to transform and improve financial services. So what's the wicked problem? Back to that thing I talked to you about earlier about always having a problem. What's the wicked problem that FinTech itself is solving? Well, the problem it's solving is it's reducing cost. Today, financial services, or historically, financial services have often been quite expensive. And that's because they've taken enormous numbers of humans behind the scenes to operate them and run them. The other reason that they're expensive is there's a tremendous amount of frictional cost involved with financial services. So today, people don't often think about this, but every time you pay a supplier with your credit card or your debit card, that supplier is having to pay away to Visa or MasterCard something like 1.5% of what you've paid. Now, although that sounds like a tiny percentage, actually to a business where businesses typically only make, say, 5% of turnover as a net profit, paying away 1.5% to a card company just for the privilege of taking money is a crazy frictional cost. So one of the things that FinTech is trying to do is remove cost at every layer, whether it be tons and tons of humans to run things or the frictional costs of delivering these services such as card fees. What FinTech also is doing is simplifying an incredibly complex subject. So it's providing tools and apps and things that help educate people and make it easier for them to pick products, just like comparison sites that we've already talked about. It's providing better information and better planning tools that allow people to make the best decisions. It's also giving faster access to new products and sign-ups. So today you can open an investment account with someone in a matter of minutes, where perhaps a few years ago you'd have had to fill in a paper form and wait in the post for it to be processed by a team and sent back to you. And of course, coming under the banner of FinTech now, we also have new forms of finance, things like peer-to-peer lending, which is perhaps fallen away, but obviously in particular, decentralized finance and crypto is probably the hot and a very controversial topic as well. So that's broadly the kind of problems that FinTech is looking to solve. And here on this slide, you can see how much interest the private equity markets and the backers have got in this FinTech market. So, you know, interesting to see that in 2021, the amount of money invested in FinTech companies rose a staggering 169% to $132 billion. It's always great if you're thinking about your career to get into an industry that's getting that much interest and that much backing, because that backing provides immense opportunity. So that's why FinTech is very, very interesting. And of course, the private equity firms and the backers are interested in it for the obvious reason, which is the companies that are disrupting the old companies are likely to replace the old companies and become immensely valuable in their own right. And that's why these companies are receiving so much backing. So one of the measures of success of tech firms is how many unicorns are born. A unicorn is a company that achieves a value or a market capitalization in excess of $1 billion. And you can see here on this slide how many new unicorns have been born and crossed that line of reaching a value of $1 billion or more. And look how fast that's accelerated in the last year. 235 FinTech unicorns now, as at the end of 2021. And so a lot of this might sound like gobbledygook to those of you who aren't necessarily familiar with FinTech or financial services. So perhaps just to throw some names at you to bring some of this back to the real world. In the UK, here are some names of kind of these new FinTech companies that have already attained unicorn status. Monzo, Oak North, Revolut, a lot of you may have used, and you will certainly have seen adverts for Starling, Wise as well. In the USA, I don't know whether you know some of these names, but obviously PayPal was a FinTech before the phrase FinTech had been coined, but it's obviously a huge and successful business. But some of these others too, Stripe, Robinhood, Adyen, Klarna, OpenSea, Ripple, and Go Cardless. I think I must have jumped past a slide because, oh, I've lost a slide. That's a shame. Oh, it's there. I must have hidden it. There we are. I see why. Sorry, this slide. Yeah, I just also quickly wanted to talk about kind of the categories of FinTech as well. So this is by no means a categorization that's universally agreed, but this is something that I've sort of done in my own sort of work that I do to sort of keep abreast of this market. So broadly, FinTech comes into these sorts of categories. There's insurance innovation. So some examples of some of the innovations going on are micro insurance, where instead of buying an annual car insurance policy, you can now buy from companies like Vago or Buy the Mile. You can buy insurance to just cover you for one journey if you want. In what's called wealth tech, well, Wealthify, my own business that I started, is a wealth tech. And in that category, we're seeing innovations in apps that allow you to automatically invest money, in apps that allow you to do trading free of charge, such as free trade. And one of the interesting areas of innovation in the coming years will be how people can get financial advice actually to help them using digital advisors rather than human advisors to bring the cost down. In the sort of personal finance arena, we're seeing apps that allow you to budget your finances better. We're seeing perhaps the opportunity and the most interesting future thing within personal finance is a new initiative backed by the government called Open Finance, which is forcing not only banks, but also investment companies, pension companies, insurance companies to make details of your products available through APIs so that other companies can switch you from those products quickly and easily with your permission, or can at least see the cost and prices you're being charged by other companies so that they can offer competitive solutions quickly and easily. We have RegTech, which is technology that's being developed to assist with the regulatory process, such as digital identities, such as AML, which stands for anti-money laundering. One of the important things you have to do as an investment company or a bank or anyone in financial services really is make sure that money that's being paid to you or through you isn't part of a money laundering scheme for criminals to layer their money and take crooked money and turn it into good money. The other final thing that companies have to do when they sign you up is what we call in the industry KYC, or know your customer. So lots of technology being developed to make the process of understanding the client you're signing up easy for the companies who are offering the services. So you will have perhaps all tried some kind of finance app recently where it's asked you to smile at the screen and blink your eyes. These are the kind of things that are coming under this category. Alternative lending, in the past, lending meant going to the bank and requesting a loan and going to see a bank manager. Today, you can do that online, and the innovative and creative ways that are transpiring for people to do that are fascinating. The latest interesting innovation that's become a really hot topic at the moment is another acronym that's used by the industry, BNPL, or Buy Now, Pay Later. You'll see when you reach the checkout on almost any store that you're buying something online today, an option for you to finance that purchase, buy it now, but pay for it monthly or pay for it later. And there are tremendous companies like Klarna and myriad of others who've offered fantastic technology in that area. Capital markets is improving the way the banks provide access to finance, particularly business funding. You'll have all seen probably crowdfunding, allowing almost anybody to invest in an interesting startup if they believe that startup is going to do something important and become valuable. And of course, the world of crypto and decentralized finance, blockchain. We have within the even within the Welsh universities courses now dedicated to some of these types of things. I won't bore you with my views on that subject today. Suffice it to say, I have an 18-year-old son with whom I have daily and very fertile debates about NFTs and Bitcoin and the perils of him putting his worldly wealth behind some of those things. Thankfully for me, he's kind of learning the lessons himself, in that he bought a few NFTs. Some of them have done well, and a couple in the last week or two have crashed and burned, and he's lost some money. But it is a fantastic and interesting new technology, and I think that the applications we will find for it that actually stick and become part of the future world of finance won't necessarily be those rather strange things like selling a picture of an ape for 1.3 million, but actually the technology does have applications that can improve things in different ways, which I would be more than happy to talk to people about at another time. The final category, I won't waffle on about this one, but payments, obviously, how you send money abroad, how you initiate payments to replace those kind of credit card only approaches, debit card approaches that we've been used to in the past. And so that's kind of a breakdown of FinTech, really. So at that point, I'm going to probably just stop talking, if that's all right, and invite anyone who would like to ask questions to ask those questions, and we'll carry on that way. What I don't know at the moment is how to switch this thing back to. Let's have a look. Can I do that? Claire, you've taken it back. Great.
Lovely. Yeah, brilliant. Oh, fantastic. Thanks very much, Richard. That was very insightful. Sarah, I'm just going to pass you over to Sarah now, who's going to ask, there's quite a few questions in the chat. So over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, so the first one from Isabel is, from your whole journey, what are you most proud of?
Oh, crikey, yes. You should have warned me of some of these questions. I think I'm in business terms, I am most proud of the Wealthify story, I suppose, because it was such a rapid ascent from an idea just 5-6 years ago to a business that's been sold to one of the largest companies in the world, for a lot of money. But more importantly than the financial gain is actually the good that it's doing for people in terms of the ease that it's provided for them to invest. And actually the pride in the fact that I think it will unquestionably become a sort of a household name brand that sticks because of the backing that Aviva, who bought it, are giving it, and the belief that we managed to transfer to them in it. So yes, I would say that's my most proud achievement.
Okay, thank you very much. And another one from Isabel. So what are the key skills you think will be most useful for a career in FinTech?
So yeah, I mean, and look, I realise I'm talking to an audience of guys, people who may be studying computer type disciplines. I think the new battleground, I guess, in FinTech, and I guess this is a predictable answer, is probably AI. You know, it's unquestionable that if you think of the problem that I described that FinTech is solving, which is you know, stripping out the need for employing millions of humans to do the job. What we've done in the first phase of FinTech is automate using technology the systematic processes that could be automated. What we haven't been able to do is obviously take out those humans where it is the intelligence of the human needed to deliver the benefit. But AI, we're really on the cusp of AI reaching the point of sort of intelligence. I think somebody said to me recently that, you know, it's expected that within the next 9 years, AI will have reached the equivalent intelligence of a human, and that in by 2045, it will be 1 billion times more intelligent than a human. That's a little bit scary. I don't want to freak anyone out, but I think AI is a very, very interesting area. It's a very broad answer. It will leave people thinking, well, what area of AI, which particular part of AI should I consider? And I can't really answer that, you know, without getting considering specific problems. I don't necessarily know the answer myself.
Okay, thank you. Another one from Isabel was, do you think being entrepreneurial is also useful as an employee?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I'm not an expert on being an employee. Perhaps my other most proud achievement is I've never worked for anyone other than me, which is quite a nice thing to be able to say at the age of 59. But yes, it absolutely is. As I've had to be involved with, you know, not only my own companies but other companies with which we've partnered and sold companies to, and what I can observe in those companies is that those people who work there, who think out of the box and behave entrepreneurially, unquestionably get on and stand out from the crowd and make a name for themselves. And those companies are absolutely looking for those individuals. They are the little hidden gems, and they're all looking for those people. You know, the problem that big companies have today is innovation. The big companies are challenged by fintechs because despite all of the money they have and all the thousands of employees they employ, they can't keep up with small companies with a handful of people, entrepreneurial people. And so they are desperately looking internally for those people that they can get behind. It's not easy, but yet the answer is definitely yeah.
Okay, great. And what advice would you give someone who might want to start a business in the future?
Well, I think some of the things I've already said really, which is make sure you know that you've identified a real significant problem that you're solving, and make sure you've tested that other people other than yourself and your close circle of friends and family agree with that problem needs solving. So, you know, the other thing I think an important advice is, I think it's very hard starting a business on your own. And although there are some sort of entrepreneurs out there who outwardly look like they did it on their own, you know, Elon Musk, people like that, in reality, whilst there may be people who've forged out on their own and led a business and started it on their own, the chances of success if you do that on your own are much, much reduced. If you can get a team of 2 or 3 of you together, 2 or 3 bright people who you trust and rely on, and you can look in the eye and you know that they are going to work hard, and that their sort of values are aligned to your own, then you are far more likely to succeed with that, you know, small group of people pulling together to go and try to solve a problem and start a business than you are if you do it on your own. The other bit of that is what I said already, which is get experience ideally in the industry or the area you're going into, because otherwise you will take years to learn sort of from the outside what you could have learned from the inside in a much shorter time, and you'll be much better placed to succeed.
Okay, thank you very much. Carys has also asked a couple of questions. So the first one is, what is the biggest risk you have taken?
Right, okay. Do you know what? I think I'm going to say that a lot of people think that entrepreneurs are massive risk takers. I'm not. I don't think I am personally a big risk taker. I think things are quite calculated and measured and balanced. One of my own personal challenges today is having made a bit of money. I get a lot of people come to me and invite me to invest in their company. And I find myself walking away from almost all of those opportunities, because when I look at the kind of risk versus reward calculation of, okay, I can risk some of my money in backing this idea, but based on the way they're trying to value it and the team they put together, those two aren't close enough for me to make the decision. So I don't think it's safe to say that that everyone who is an entrepreneur is a massive, crazy risk taker. But there has to be a moment where you are prepared to take this risk. I'm not answering the question because I'm trying to think of the right answer of what's the biggest risk I've ever taken. I can't think of one. Sorry, you have to duck it.
Okay, no problem. And what one piece of advice would you give a graduate looking to set up their own business?
Well, everything I've said already, plus I suppose just network lots, talk to people. Whatever you do, don't hide away in a box and try and work it out on your own. There is a remarkable, particularly now, one of the really exciting things in the UK is, when I was starting my first business, there was nothing to support you, literally nothing. Today in the UK, it's just poles apart. There are, reach out through LinkedIn and other social networks to other entrepreneurs who've done things in the area you're interested in and ask for help. Ask if you can talk to them, and you'll be amazed. A lot of people have got the time to have that conversation. They actually want to help young people start businesses. And so reach out, network, talk to people, ask for help. Whatever you do, don't go quiet and sit in a box and think you're going to work it out on your own.
Okay, thank you very much for that advice. And John has said, amazingly insightful talk with so many successful businesses created throughout your career. With hindsight, are you glad you didn't get the job at confused.com? And do you feel that the situation spurred you on? And any key tips for our students on how to deal with job interview rejections?
Yeah, I'm absolutely delighted I didn't get the job, because I might well have taken it, because I was at a point where I sort of felt like that was the right thing to do. And of course, by not taking it, it kind of forced my hand into and ended up setting up my own business, which went on, to be successful in the world of financial services. So I'm really, really glad. Advice for people to deal with rejection job interviews is that you can never legislate for the people you're competing against when you go for a job interview. You could be a great candidate for the job. You could and might have got that job every other time, but you just don't know who else was sat in the room before you or after you and how good they were. So you should never take a knock from the fact that you've not got that job that you've applied for, your dream job. You've got to try and take the learnings from it. But I would definitely advise following up the rejection with some questions about what did I not do right, what could I have done better, because you've got to try and learn from that decline in why you didn't get the job. And try and sort of improve your act and sharpen your pencil so that you could be better, in the next opportunity that comes along.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Steve has just said, can I bottle this advice, please? 1, solve problems. 2, entrepreneurs are not risk takers. And 3, build a team. These are the 3 things that the Centre for Entrepreneurship repeat often. Do they? Sorry, right, yeah. And so what do they repeat often? That entrepreneurs are not risk takers. Yeah. I think there's a mix of them. I think there are plenty that are risk takers. I mean, I would consider, I've come across individuals who have had a job earning 6 figures, and they've woken up one day with their idea and they've walked out and they've gone and remortgaged their house for £200,000 or whatever, and then they've gone to start their business. Now that to me is taking a risk. I've never, thankfully, had to do that. Maybe by not doing that, I've potentially not had as much success as I might have done. Risk,
you know, risk is related to reward. If you take big risk, you can potentially get big rewards. If you control the risk, perhaps the rewards aren't necessarily always as large as they could be. But I would say that what's interesting today is in the world of starting a business today, you really don't need to take as much risk as you think. I've got plenty of people approaching me today who want to start businesses, and they expect to start a business on a full salary. They expect me to invest 100 grand in their company to back it, and they want to walk out one job. And although that hurts me to think of that, given what I went through, having to work in many cases years with nothing, actually the reality is it's a seller's market right now. So if you've got a great idea, you'll find no shortage of people who will back you and allow you to draw a salary out of it. So the risks you have to take might not be as significant as you think.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Richard. That's been an absolutely fantastic session. And I think, you know, a lot of people have taken some great insight and advice from you. So thanks so much for taking time out of your diary today. Really appreciate it. We're now going to be moving on to Isabel, who's our entrepreneurship advisor. You're more than welcome to stay on the call, Richard, but understand if you need to leave. But I'm sure everyone would like to show their appreciation for your time today. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. Over to you, Isabel.
Thanks, Claire, and thanks, Richard. That was really fantastic. I know I'm feeling inspired. I hope everybody else is as well. And hopefully we'll move on now to link a bit in with what you've been talking about. So for everyone on the call that doesn't know me already, I'm Izzy. I'm the Enterprise Champion at the Centre for Entrepreneurship. So I'm just going to share my screen, and we've got a kind of fun little interactive quiz that we're going to do. So give me 2 seconds. Claire, are you seeing my slides?
I am.
Perfect. Right, thanks again, Richard. That was really wonderful. So if everyone can get their phones out and go to menti.com, you can see it just on the top of the screen there, and pop in the code, and then we're just going to do a little bit of an interactive quiz to find out more about the centre, learn a little bit more about entrepreneurship, kind of what that means, not just in terms of you know, real life experience that Richard's talked and give some really good examples, but also about how you can maybe recognise it in yourself as well. So if you're all on, you should be able to vote on this question now. So have you heard of the Centre for Entrepreneurship before this call? Perhaps you've seen some emails from us. As you're voting, it'll come up on the slide, so you'll be able to see what everyone's answering, but you won't be able to see your individual answers. So pop your answer in, yes or no, and press enter for anyone else that's joining us in the call. You might have received our emails before. You might have heard about some of our events and activities. Hopefully you would have heard of us through careers as well. We do a lot of work together, which is really good. And I popped into the hub space before Christmas, and hopefully we'll be there again once things open up again. So if we've got any more votes, are we all logged in? Can we vote on this slide? I've only got 1 vote, so there must be a few more of you in the room. I can put a countdown. Let's do a little countdown. 1 minute's quite a lot, maybe not. Right, we'll move on to the next one. Well, at least we've had 2 that have heard from us already. If I move on to the slide, you should be able to, it should appear on your phone, and if it doesn't, there's a little note saying join the slide that's on the screen. So were you inspired by Richard's talk? I certainly was. I think it was so interesting. Like Steve said, summarising on those points, they're not risk takers, solve problems and build a team. I think that's really good advice, and I think it shows perhaps not what we traditionally think of as entrepreneurs. You might think entrepreneurs are big risk takers, but actually it's finding that problem and doing the research. And once you know you've got the research and you've got a problem people want a solution to, then you can go ahead and make something happen without taking that big risk. Good, people be inspired, excellent. 3, lovely. Not sure, that's fine. Great. Oh, it's lovely to see these live answers coming in. Perfect, I'll move on to the next one. So for everyone that's in the room and got their phones out, do you consider yourself an entrepreneur? Perhaps maybe you don't know what that means, and we can tell you a little bit more about that now. So feel free to vote for that one. You know, entrepreneurs come in all different shapes and sizes, and you can see lots of, you know, the ones you see on the TV, you know, Elon Musk and Richard Branson doing some amazing things, but, you know, entrepreneur just isn't necessarily, they're not all like that. Sometimes they're doing things in different areas, and they're kind of social entrepreneurs, and maybe you haven't heard much about that at all. So we can tell you a little bit more about that as well. So I've got a few no's, that's fine, and one yes, excellent. Right, I'll move on. I'm going to make this nice and quick because I'm sure you'll want a break between the talks as well. So does anyone in the room own a business or self-employed or freelance currently? You know, using different terms to entrepreneur here because not necessarily everyone would consider themselves an entrepreneur, but they might be a business owner. I want to. Great, that's really good. And there's lots of support at the centre for help you if you want to start a business or freelance or become self-employed. Okie doke, next one. So for those that might want to start a business, or perhaps, you know, you're daydreaming and you're thinking of taking over the world, why would you do it? Would you do it because you would get loads of money? Would you do it because you want to be your own boss and maybe, you know, you don't want to work 9 to 5, you want to work just in the afternoon, or you want to move to Canada or travel across the world and just work where you want to, when you want to? Maybe that would give you the flexibility of having your own business. Or maybe you want to make a difference to the world and you think you've got, you know, an insight to a real problem that might solve, you know, be a really good solution for a lot of people and really make a difference to some communities. What do you think? I think you can click more than one, so you could click all 3. Either way, give me some answers.
The voting's closed at the moment, is he?
Oh, it's closed. Oh yeah, so it is. Open. There we go. Thanks, Steve. Oh, I'm pleased to see Make a Difference has got the biggest. Be my own boss, absolutely. I think with the increase in remote working as well, I've heard lots of stories about people just traveling the world and working when they want to, which is really cool. Fantastic. Next one. So I'm going to talk a little bit about ACRO. And ACRO is a Welsh Government kind of model of entrepreneurship. So what do you think it means? So it's talking about the characteristics of being an entrepreneur. What are the type of qualities somebody might have that make them an entrepreneur? So it's called ACRO, and there's 4 choices here, so you can pick which you think ACRO might stand for. So which of these kind of rings true for becoming an entrepreneur? Nice, let's see votes coming in. Any more votes? Getting lots of votes for the top right one. And it is right, that is absolutely the right one. It's attitude, creativity, relationships, and organisation. Although I would argue that authentic, confident, resilient, and opportunistic are also qualities of an entrepreneur. But yes, the ACRO stands for this one: attitude, creativity, relationships, and organisation. So I'm just going to go through each of those categories really, and within each one there are some skills that you might recognise in yourself, you might not. So we've got confident, self-motivated, determined, and competitive within attitude. So can you see any of these qualities within yourself? You can pick more than one, or you can pick none of the above. Sometimes people might be, you know, really competitive, but actually not very confident about it. They might kind of be quietly sat doing something competitive, you know, behind a screen, or it might be really determined, but perhaps, you know, not very competitive. Definitely you can click more than one. I think I'd probably click maybe a few of them. Lots of self-motivated and determined, that's great. A few more confident, wonderful. Confident's a tricky one, sometimes different levels, obviously. I'm glad no one's clicked none, which is lovely. Right, I'm going to move on to creativity. So within creativity, we've got problem solver, develop good ideas, can spot opportunities, and creative. So do you have any of these skills? Can you recognise any of these skills in yourself? You can click more than one, or you can click none of the above. Develop good ideas. Good ideas is a very good one. Obviously, we've seen from Richard's talk, he was developing a lot of good ideas and he started some really exciting businesses. Problem solver, creative, lovely. Well, we've got problem solvers and develop good ideas here. So we've got a team here ready to build a company. I think we should get some of you together. Wonderful, really good. Excellent, move on to the next one. So within relationships, we've got a people person. We've got good at managing difficult situations. We've got can spot opportunities, a good negotiator or persuader, and good at communicating. So can you recognise any of those in yourself? Or none of the above? People person, good at managing difficult situations, excellent. Oh, we've got a none of the above, that's fine. It's good to see where you think you can't recognise any of these in yourself as well, and perhaps that's something to improve. Obviously, relationships for whether you're becoming an entrepreneur or whether you're going into into a company as an employee, you're going to have to talk to some other people and develop some relationships. So that's definitely something, skills you can work on throughout your time at uni as well. Lots of good at communicating. Wonderful. Right, and I'll move on to the last one. So organisation, we've got like to plan. I'd definitely pick that one. Good at making decisions, good at goal setting, and likes risk. So that risk is one of the ones we were talking about with Richard. I'll probably say I'm not a big risk taker, but I definitely like to plan. Goal setting is an interesting one, particularly your time at uni. Perhaps you're setting quite a lot of goals for what you want to achieve throughout the year. None of the above, that's fine. Likes risk. That's one of those qualities that some people might see as maybe not a great quality and others might see it as a really good quality. It's interesting to see what others, people consider good or bad qualities. Lovely. And what other skills do you think entrepreneurs might have other than the ones we've listed? So I think you can freely put whichever words you like and they should pop up on the screen. So what other skills do you think entrepreneurs might have? It takes all sorts, no entrepreneur is the same. Lots have different qualities in different amounts. Some are really confident, some will get someone else to do all the presenting, for example. Confidence, obviously, within the ones we had a little look at. What other skills do you think entrepreneurs might have? Anyone wants to submit any? Empathy, love that one. Yeah, that's really good. Definitely understanding what other people are feeling and thinking to your ideas and being able to understand that as well. Delegation, yeah, you can't do everything, particularly as owning a business or managing a project within an organisation. You might want to delegate tasks out. That's a really good skill to learn. Definitely a skill you have to learn, otherwise you end up taking too much on. Anything else? I'll skip to the next one now. Ooh, interesting. Dynamism, wonderful. What's that one? Coding. Optimistic. Yeah, optimistic, definitely. Sometimes the entrepreneur's journey can take all sorts of twists and turns. Definitely being optimistic is a really good skill to have. Wonderful. Right, I'm going to move on to the next one. Do you think entrepreneurs are born or made? I was asked this at my job interview for this position. You might argue that they're born, but mostly the way we've talked about it, you'll see that we're talking about a list of qualities and characteristics, and these can be learned and these can be kind of nurtured and grown over time. And being an entrepreneur isn't just about being a business owner. Richard was talking about being an entrepreneurial as an employee and how important that is, and actually how employers are really looking for entrepreneurial employees. And there's other types as well. So using kind of entrepreneurial skills to make a difference in the world, like a lot of social entrepreneurs. It's good to see that mix. Thank you very much. Right, now to a little bit about the Centre for Entrepreneurship. And some of you've obviously heard about this before. So what do you think we do? I think you can click more than one. What do you think that we do kind of day to day? Maybe you've seen some of our stuff already. Maybe you don't know what we do at all. Helps develop entrepreneurial skills for all careers. Lovely. Any other votes? gives out free money. Yeah, definitely all skills. Well, I was a bit cheeky because I didn't include in all of category, but we do all of those. So that's, yeah, everyone, you should have said everyone, and then we would have all nice 4 colours on the screen. But yes, we do all of that, and I'll go on to talk a little bit about the centre now. Just for a bit of interest for us, really, what type of thing would you be interested in getting involved in if we were putting on? So do you want free money for a business idea? Do you want to come to some of our socials and where we give out lots of free pizza? Do you want to take part in some networking with guest speakers who are a little bit like Richard today? Take part in some workshops to gain some new skills, or if there's anything else, just drop a message in the chat and I can have a little look at it later as well. This is just useful for us to know so we can kind of gauge what you might be interested in getting involved in. Networking's a good one. Definitely, it's all about who you know, and you can only know what you see. So perhaps you hadn't heard from an entrepreneur before, but you heard from Richard today and you're feeling inspired. I'll move on so we can give you a little bit of an overview about the centre now. Oh, and another one, virtually or in person. It's a big debate in our office. How would you like to attend events? Hopefully hybrid is the aim for this year, but just so we can know, anyone who's able to vote on this, that would be really useful. Got one in person. We're restricted at the moment, but we're hoping come February, these things will open up a little bit more. Right, I will move on to talk about us at the centre. So if you haven't heard about us before, we are dedicated a kind of department that work across the university to kind of share all things entrepreneurship, whether that's starting a business, whether that's gaining entrepreneurial skills. We're here with events and talks and workshops. We've got one-to-one support and we have funding available as well. And tonight we are hosting an event, which is our Tech for Good Meet and Mingle, which I'll put a link in the chat. So it's a virtual event from 5 to 7 tonight. We've got 4 speakers focusing around the theme Tech for Good. So we've got a VR company working in healthcare. We've got a WordPress company who